So if you're not sure how to start a software business, you should marry a software developer. That's what I did. That's my advice for the audience.
In this episode, you'll get to know Laura Roeder, the anti-hustle founder, and you'll hear the story of how she builds and sells businesses while still leaving time to have fun and travel the world with her family. I'm Dave Crenshaw, and this is My Success Show. Welcome back, friends, to the Dave Crenshaw Success Show. This is where I speak to some of the most successful people I've met in my life's journey, and I'm on the hunt for universal principles to help both you and my family succeed. In case it's your first time here and you're not familiar with me, I'm a best-selling author. I speak around the world to Fortune 500 companies, and I've taught millions of people how to be successful through my online courses, especially on LinkedIn Learning. With this show, I wanted to create something lasting to help my family succeed, and I thought you'd enjoy learning along with them. I'm looking for people like today's guest who is an amazing example of having multifaceted success. That means success in many areas of their life, not just with money or with their career. And as I talk to them, I'm looking for actions that you can use right now to be successful. So as you listen to today's episode, I want you to look for something you can do. Look for one action you can take today or this week to make my guest success story a part of your success story. Laura Roeder is a lifelong entrepreneur and founder of several multi-million-dollar bootstrapped companies. She's the founder of Paperbell, Coach Compare, Meet Edgar, Marie Forleo's B School, and LKR Social Media. Laura was named one of the top entrepreneurs under 30 and has spoken about entrepreneurship at the White House in the United States. Her favorite way to have fun is traveling around the globe with her family. And Laura, thank you for taking a little time from all of those things to be here on the show today.
Thank you, Dave. I'm excited to talk to you today.
As I was doing research and looking into what you've accomplished, I'm just so impressed by the number of businesses that you've started, how you've successfully built them and exited them. That is not easy to do. And the fact that you've done it many times is truly remarkable.
Thank you. Definitely had a few fails along the way as well, all part of the journey. But yeah, thank you.
Well, and as we go through this journey, I would like you to talk about those because, as you know, learning from failures is sometimes more instructional than just all of the success, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So where are you located right now?
I'm in Brighton, UK, which is just south of London.
And you're married, you have children?
Yep, I have 2 kids in elementary school.
Oh, that's great. So, all right, let's talk about where you started. Every guest, I ask the same question, and it's a question that we were asked many times when we were growing up, which is, what did you want to be when you grew up?
One thing that I was focused on for a long time was actually being a speechwriter. I don't know why I wanted to just write the speeches, but I thought that would be a cool job to be a speechwriter. I didn't end up doing anything like that, but I had that idea for a while.
But you didn't want to get up in front of people. You just wanted to write the speech.
Yeah, which now I really like doing. So I'm not sure. Maybe I was like, but what would I talk about if I got up in front of people? So
yeah, well, I saw that. I was watching some of the places where you had spoken in front of an audience, and I was like, oh, she does a great job with this. I'm assuming you do that as well as part of your career. You accept invitations to go speak at events.
Yeah, it's something, honestly, for a lot of speakers, they're getting customers from the events. For me, I just kind of love business and entrepreneurship. Like I've spoken at a conference called MicroConf for software businesses. My business targets life coaches. They're not at software conferences, but I just love learning from others there and love talking about it.
Okay, so you wanted to be a speechwriter, but when you started to form concepts about what your real career was going to be, did that happen in high school? Did that happen in college? Where did that idea start to come from, especially that you would be an entrepreneur?
Well, before I was an entrepreneur, my first career was a designer, graphic designer and web designer. And that's something that I started to get interested in high school. I'm kind of that first internet age. So I had AOL when I was in middle school and high school, and I was I learned how to code websites and create websites and do basic graphic design then. So I got interested in graphic design. And when I went to college, that's what I planned to do as my career. And that's what I did do for my first job.
Okay. Where did you go to school?
University of Texas at Austin, which is also where I'm from. I grew up in Austin.
Were there things that you studied or learned in college that were helpful for you later on or that are still helpful for you today?
No,
Okay.
I don't. I had fun in college and I made some really great friends. But I went to University of Texas, is one of the largest universities in America. My classes had hundreds of people in them. It was a lot of like multiple choice tests. There was almost nothing that I that I learned at college that I ended up using later.
That's an interesting experience, though. So clearly, you're highly educated. Clearly, you have a lot of expertise in what it is that you do. Where were you getting the knowledge that you use now? Were you just studying a lot on your own? Where has that knowledge come from, if it wasn't from your university experience?
The internet, I would say largely. So yeah, I mean the internet and just figuring it out as I went. I mean also back then, now you can study entrepreneurship in university, which I think is really interesting. I don't think that was a thing back then, or if it was, I had never heard of it. But when I was in college, I definitely wasn't thinking, oh, I'd like to be an entrepreneur. I just thought I'd like to be a designer. I actually wanted to be a magazine designer, but I did end up getting a job as a designer at an ad agency after I graduated.
And how did you get that job?
It was really hard. It took such a long time. I always have so much sympathy for people who are looking for a job because I think that's just one of the toughest things in life, to be applying and getting rejected over and over and over again. So I was in a new city. I was in Chicago and I didn't know anyone. I didn't have any connections. So it was just applying cold to job after job after job. And finally I got one.
That brings up an interesting concept, though, which is I think sometimes people look at being a business owner, being an entrepreneur, and they see a whole lot of risk. And there is risk. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. But what they don't realize, and you're bringing up here, is that to work for someone else is also risky.
Oh, yeah.
When you create your own workplace, when you create your own job, it's all on you. There's no one to blame but you. But when you're applying for a job, right, you've got to go through all of those hoops and all of that. Was going through that experience, did that form part of the way that you were thinking about what you wanted to do in the future, running a business rather than trying to apply for a job?
It didn't occur to me at first to run a business. The way I got interested in running a business was, so I was a designer at an ad agency, and I was interested in the advertising strategy, marketing strategy, client work. I didn't want to just design. I found that a bit boring. But in the agency world, to be involved with the strategic side, you have to be at the top of the pile. So you have to be like what's, often called a creative director title. And I kind of thought, okay, I don't want to switch over. I thought maybe I should switch careers and be an account executive and be on the strategic side. I don't really like that either. And I'm like, okay, being a creative director sounds good, but I'm 20 years old. It's going to be another 10 years before I can climb up this ladder and be a creative director. Or if I started freelancing, I could kind of do whatever I wanted and I could kind of do it all. When you're freelancing, you're obviously involved in getting the clients and the strategic direction of the work that you're doing, that whole client relationship. I think actually a lot of the things that a lot of designers, I was really excited about. Like I was interested in how the business worked and getting the clients and stuff. So that's where I had the idea to start working for myself. I'm like, I don't want to wait 10 years to do the work that I want to do. If I started working for myself, that's just sounded like a much more interesting work day to me.
Did you start to create that business while you were still working as a designer within a company? What was that balance, or what did that transition from working from someone to owning a business look like for you?
For me, it was jumping off a cliff, which I would not, necessarily recommend. So I had this idea, okay, I could go part time and that could be best of both worlds. And I was really underutilized at my job. I spent a lot of time with nothing to do. So I thought, oh, okay, this is going to be great for my employer. They'll only have to pay me half the amount. And then I can, still have that steady paycheck while I'm finding my first clients. So I talked to the business owner about it. She said, no, you can't go part time. But at that point, I had gotten so excited about my freelance business. I said, if I can't go part time, I'm just going to have to quit entirely. And so that's what I did. So I didn't do, again, not not saying this is advice, but I didn't have any clients. I didn't have any work lined up. I was just like into my job, start my new life as a freelancer. And I had a little money saved up, but it was my first entry level job out of college. I wasn't making much money, but my expenses were also really low at the same time.
It's interesting, Laura, that you brought up, you jumped off a cliff. I just interviewed another entrepreneur who talked about how she had another job that was going on and how that worked out for her to do both at the same time. But I've seen that either pathway can be successful. I mean, at least you're more focused, right? Because you don't have anything else. And sometimes that pressure creates urgency that's necessary to get the business off the ground. Was that the case for you?
Yes. I mean, I totally agree with you that there's no one right way to do it. But for me, it was like, well, I better find a client or I won't have any money. I didn't have any other source of income or anyone paying for anything. But what I will say as advice is when people are interested in starting a business, I'm such a huge fan of any kind of freelance service, coaching, consulting, because all you need is one client and you get paid right away, right? It's not like you're starting a restaurant or a shop where you have all these startup costs and you need all this money. Like to be hired for any service, if I give you an hour of my time and you pay me for that hour, I just need one client and you get paid right away. So I think that's a great way to start out in business, especially if you've never run any kind of business before, because you just learn all the basics, the ins and outs. I mean, I was new to Chicago. I knew that I would need business owners, but I didn't know any business owners. So I started going to all the Chamber of Commerce events, and that's how I found my clients.
That is such an important point, is when you are trying to grow a business and get clients, and I think this applies to someone who maybe isn't even an entrepreneur, someone who's in sales, you need to go where your customer is. You go where your customer gathers. It's such a basic thing, and yet I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs miss that step. They start advertising, they start buying space, they go out and knock doors, whatever heck it is, and that's not the way to do it. That's the less efficient and effective way to do it.
Yeah, I just showed up at the time. Chicago had different chambers of commerce for all the different neighborhoods because it's a big city. And I actually found that they all wanted you to join, but actually they would let you pay like $5 and, because they needed people at the events. So I was like, oh, I don't really have the, $200 to join, but I'll just pay the $5 to show up to the one event. And it was great. And I met so many people that helped me along my journey. So it's like I met people that became clients, but I also just met experienced business owners that were so helpful and just taught me so much.
Let's pause on that for a second, because I think networking, which is what you were doing, and those who are not familiar, sometimes we have some novices here. Networking is building relationships with other people, professional typically, and there's a right way to go about networking and there's a wrong way to go about networking. Clearly, you were successful with it. So can you talk about just a couple of things that you did or you saw others do in those situations that made them successful with networking?
A big lesson that I've learned about networking is there's some people you hit it off with and some people you don't, and just focus on those natural relationships that you hit it off with. Because I've been in situations where there's someone who I quote unquote should meet. They would be a good connection for me, or they might know people that would know clients for me, but we just didn't connect. And I always found that it was always much more valuable, even if someone didn't seem like a strategic connection, right? If I couldn't see how they were going to get me business, if we just liked each other and we just liked chatting, that was always, always, always more valuable than someone who kind of made sense on paper, but just we didn't end up becoming friends. So that's just always been my strategy, is just like, which is great, right? It makes it really easy and fun. Talk to who you actually want to talk to. Keep up with who you're actually interested in keeping up with. They like you too. They remember you. Because if someone doesn't like you, they're not going to refer you. It's just the truth.
Well, and you're just going to waste so much time and energy trying to make everyone like you. That is such a true thing, and it took me a while to learn that principle. So this first business, what was that you were building?
So that was just freelance design. So I would mostly make websites for local businesses.
And how did that go as a business? Was that pretty successful? Did it work for a while and then not?
It was very successful for me. So I was making about $30,000 a year at my job. So that was kind of my big goal, to make $30,000 a year in my own business.
What year are we talking about with that?
That would be about 2006, something like that.
Okay. That just gives us an idea of how much 30,000 was worth.
Yeah. So I hit that number in my first year, which I was, very proud of, going from zero to like replacing my full-time income. And then I was like, okay, I want to double it. And then in my second year, I made about 60,000. I hit that goal. So after that, I'm like, okay, I want to make six figures, right? Really common goal. Like I want to make 100,000 a year. And that's when I kind of hit a wall. And I realized with my current business model, I'm like, okay, I can't really, work double the hours. I'm already working full time. I don't really feel like I can double my prices because I'm brand new. I'm like, okay, well, I guess, in order to grow the business, I would have to kind of create an agency and have people under me. And I had seen all the things I didn't like about the agency business working at the ad agency that I'd been at before. I'm like, I really don't want to have an agency business. And that is what guided me to my next business model, which ended up being online courses, which is a much more scalable business model.
What led to your interest in that? Like, why did you feel like that was the right business for you?
Because I'd been making websites for local businesses. And like I said, this was around 2006, 2007. This is when social media started becoming a thing. Like Twitter was released, you can make a Facebook, I think it was called a community page then for your business. So my customers would ask me, should I be on social media? What do I do? Do I link it on my website? How does it work? And I would just tell them about it. And one of them said to me, you could get paid just for this part. So I'm like, oh, this sounds a lot easier than like making a whole website. I can just talk about social media. And I started down the road of doing social media consulting. But, I was in the online world. I knew that they weren't called online courses then. They were called info products then. I knew that info products were a thing. And I'm like, okay, I could make an info product. My first one was about how to use Twitter for marketing. I'm like, I could make an info product about how to use Twitter. And I think it's so important to find what's a natural fit for you. Like we were talking about the networking. Some people are a fit for you. Some people are not. The first time I did an online class, I found it so much easier to sell than consulting. I think I made like $3,000 the first class that I sold. And I was like, oh, this was great. I felt like it was so much easier than trying to sell a contract for $3,000. So that's how I kind of stumbled into it.
There really was a time period, wasn't there, where that sort of product was easier to sell and commanded a much higher ticket price.
Yes. I think it was a few $100s that I sold it for.
Was Meet Edgar what you did next after that?
Yes. So Meet Edgar is social media scheduling software. So, I brought up social media. I continued to do classes about online marketing and social media marketing. And I was teaching a class about how to create a collection of all your social media updates and not just post them once, but repurpose them and have them in different categories and all this stuff. And Meet Edgar was and is software that did for you automatically what I was teaching people to do manually in the class.
See, that I think is a totally different ballgame, right? Because it's one thing to teach people, this is what you do on social media. This is how you bring in customers. That's all educational. Now you're providing a software service. And I know that for those who are not familiar, if you haven't heard of SaaS, that's software as a service. That's a particular type of business. So to me, that feels like a very, very different discipline that requires a lot different skill set to create that. So what was that like for you making that transition? Was that easy? Was that hard? Where'd you get the knowledge to do that?
So, if you're not sure how to start a software business, you should marry a software developer. That's what I did. That's my advice. So that's how it came about. I was doing the social media class, and then I met my husband, Chris, and he helped me figure out that what I was teaching in the class, you could make into software. So for me, I don't know how to code. I don't know how to make the software, but what I did and what I still do is focus on the marketing side. So I actually was using the same skill set that I'd used for my online courses, just applying them to a different kind of business model.
If you hadn't met your husband, do you think that that's something that would have been on your radar, or would you have gone down a different path?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely something that was already on my radar because at that time, I didn't have kids yet, but I knew that I wanted to have kids. And I knew that I wanted a business that could really thrive without me once I had kids and once I wanted to spend more time with my family. So I was interested in different business models where that could happen, and software was one of them. So it's one of those alternate reality. I don't know if I hadn't met him, if I would have still gone into software and found a different co-founder or something like that. But he definitely shortened the path. And yeah, we started that company together.
Yeah, and you knew that you needed to change away from that. Just a side note, the word launch is triggering to me because of what that's like in those info marketing things, right? Because everything's about the launch, and
Yep.
it's very time consuming to prep for those launches over and over on a consistent schedule.
It's a very different type of, especially marketing schedule. Actually, it's something that confused me a little bit when I started into software because I was used to, I love doing when you do launches, you do the big yearly calendar, right? You have your calendar for the year and you're like, we're going to do launches in February and September, and then we're going to launch this other program in July, and then we're going to run the promo on Black Friday. And you have your marketing mapped out that way. Now in software, I don't do any of that. There's no event-based marketing. There's no live marketing. It's all kind of improving systems to bring people in. So launch also is a triggering word for me, but I do miss the big wall calendar. That was kind of fun.
So I want to pause for a second before we go deeper into Meet Edgar, which is a huge part of your story, and just highlight something that I'm noticing. And the words come out from you as easier and natural fit, and that's too hard. That's too much work. And I think that's great. I love that. Where does that philosophy come from of wanting to make life easier for yourself? Can you just sort of expand a little bit on why that's a big deal to you?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely started my business for freedom, which I think a lot of entrepreneurs do. I think a lot of us start working for ourselves because we want more freedom in our lives. And I really wanted to enjoy what I was doing. And there's so many people that are running businesses that they don't enjoy. They don't like the business. They don't like the clients. They find it very stressful. And I'm just kind of like, what's the point of working for yourself? If I'm going to have this much stress, I'd at least rather have a job and not be responsible for the whole thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think sometimes we can forget how much optionality we have. It's just human nature, right? We get used to one thing. We get used to doing things a certain way. Change is scary. And I've just always tried to be really open-minded and remember that I can change anything. If I'm not enjoying the customer base, if I'm not enjoying the business model, if I'm not enjoying the way I'm running the team, try something else. And that's what I do.
Let's go into that Meet Edgar story. Talk to me about the ramp up, the first year or so.
So Meet Edgar was a huge success right away. And I will say I've since exited the company, which is why I often talk about it in past tense, but it does still exist. And so, yeah, when we launched Meet Edgar, it was an existing category. There were already really big players in the market, but we had kind of a new spin on it, this idea of loading up your content and letting the tool keep sending it out for you. And in retrospect, it was very much right place, right time. I already had the audience built up because I was already doing social media classes. So I wasn't, launching it totally cold. I had an existing business that I could launch it to. So we were a bootstrap business, meaning we didn't raise any money. And we hit $1 million a year in reoccurring revenue, I think 11 months after launch, which is huge for a bootstrap business, very unusual. And I went on maternity leave 3 months after launching the business, and I worked part-time ever since. So I was pregnant when I launched this business. I knew I was going on leave. So I'm like, I'm not going to launch a business that's going to fail as soon as I go on maternity leave. That doesn't make any sense. So I really designed it from the beginning to be able to grow and thrive without just me pushing everything forwards.
Yeah, that's so important. And I think that definitely contributed to the success. So many entrepreneurs create their business and they build it dependent upon them. And often without realizing it, right? Their intent is just to grow the business, but what they don't realize is if the business growth is always dependent on them being there, like you said, they're just creating a job. They haven't created something lasting. So I like the fact that the difficulty that having to go on maternity leave presented actually contributed to the success of Meet Edgar.
Yeah, I always joke that everyone should be pregnant when they when they launch a business because it was a great forcing function, because this is hard for so many entrepreneurs to take themselves out to let other people do things, and I just kind of had to from the beginning.
So you built the business so that it wasn't dependent on you. How long did you run it with a lot of employees? When did you make a transition in that business model?
So something really unique about a software business is the actual value delivery. The core value is in the software. What people are paying for is the actual software. And the software is not provided by a human, right? It needs humans to fix its bugs. It might, go down or threaten to go down every so often, and someone has to pick it back up. But software businesses can be a very low human business. And after the business had plateaued for a while and still wasn't growing, I'm like, I think this business could run with kind of a skeleton team and go into a kind of maintenance mode, and it wouldn't actually change the revenue of the business. So about 7 years after starting it, that's exactly what we did. We went from having a team of, W-2 full-time employees to cutting it down to just one part-time freelance developer. I think we had 2 part-time freelance customer service people, and just kind of put the business in maintenance mode. And we're able to do that because we had built up the revenue. And the beauty of SaaS, software as a service, as you said earlier, is the reoccurring revenue. People pay for a subscription, and if they're still using the software, they're going to keep paying for a subscription. And that, there were so many lessons in that, but I think one of the core ones for me was really getting clear on what that value mechanism is in your business.
One of the hardest things for entrepreneurs to do, in my experience coaching them, is let people go. And I'm sure that you experienced that. Can you talk a little bit about how that felt to do that and how you moved past it in a productive way that was still compassionate?
So it took me definitely a long time to come to this decision to run it in maintenance mode and let the team go. And, because the business, it had stopped growing, but it wasn't failing. So we were able to give people a generous severance. We were able to give people, plenty of time to find their new position and help finding their new position. So all of that certainly helped, but it was, getting fired is horrible. And there's no two ways around that. And that's kind of, I think the mistake a lot of entrepreneurs make is focusing on how hard it is for the business owner. It is horribly hard for the business owner. You do not need to talk about that with the employee. They do not care about how it's hard.
This is really hard for me to fire you.
Right.
I want you to understand how hard this is for me. Yeah, that's not a good approach.
That is your problem. That is not their problem. So it was a really difficult thing to do, although it's been, I was able to leave it on good terms and people went on to have like amazing careers at some really cool companies. And that's kind of how I framed it at the end of the day was like, this company isn't really going anywhere. Like this company has gone flat. There's not growth opportunities for you in your career at this company. And you deserve to go somewhere where you have those growth opportunities.
So you achieved the dream of being an entrepreneur, which is a successful exit. How did you make that happen?
So I let the team go. I put the business in maintenance mode. I actually thought I would just keep running it like that. I was like, okay, it's going to be I'll just collect the money from the business and I won't have to mess with it too much and I'll be in maintenance mode. And that was my plan. And then after doing it for like not very long, like 3 to 6 months, I was like, this doesn't feel good. And I think it was because as an entrepreneur, it's about growth. It's about that excitement. And running a business that I had just accepted was going to be flat, was going to decline, was not going to grow. I'm like, this isn't really how I want to spend my time, even though I wasn't spending my time day to day, just mentally, it felt like a drag. And that's when I decided, I don't think holding on to it is the right move. I think it's time to sell it. And even though the business wasn't growing anymore, it was still a great asset for someone else to acquire so that they could do some different strategies on it, maybe that we hadn't done and get it to grow again. So, which I think is another big lesson. Like I see a lot of people who don't try to sell their business. It doesn't occur to them that they can. A lot of businesses get just shut down or left, or the business owner gets so burned out that they can't even deal with the idea of selling it because it is a big process to sell it. And there's often valuable assets. Like even if the business itself maybe isn't profitable, maybe you've built up a website with a lot of SEO value, or maybe you've built up a great email list or something like that. There's often assets that you could sell in a business that just get kind of left behind.
Well, and another thing that I see keeps people from selling it is it's their baby. They don't like the idea of someone else taking it over. And so they cling to it because they're afraid of someone else ruining the thing that they created. I'm not getting that impression from you. It sounds like you were much more pragmatic about the sell.
Yeah, I'm like, my babies are my babies. My business is my business.
Yeah. That's healthy, though. I think that's really healthy to separate yourself from it like that. Okay, you mentioned your baby's your baby. So let's pause and talk about that for a second. How do you structure yourself and your week to give time to them? I can tell that being a mom is very important to you. That's a very difficult juggling act to be an entrepreneur and to be a mom. So what are some tips? What are some things that you do to make that work?
Yeah. So, and my husband and I work together. So now we're doing another software startup that we also work together on. And so we both have worked part-time since we had kids, and our oldest is 9 now. So that was 9 years ago. At our current company, actually everybody works part-time. And I have a few theories about this. One, I think people have about like 3 or 4 hours a day in them of really focused deep work. I think most of us have a kind of half day of like really good work. And then we often have another half day of like meetings that we may or may not need to be in, email, a lot of busy work. So that's part of it, is just cutting down your hours to only the essential hours where you're actually getting productive work done. And the other big thing about balance for me is it all needs to get done, but it does not all need to get done by me. So especially some of the more like time consuming parts of the business, like customer service is just something that it's not something we're trying to optimize, right? We're trying to answer every email like very well, very thoroughly, give people a great experience. It just takes as much time as it takes. And we have thousands of customers, so it takes a good amount of time. So if I did my own customer service, I wouldn't be able to do anything else. We only need 2 part-time people is what we have at Paperbell now. They focus all of their time just on doing that. We don't have any meetings. We don't have any other busy work for them. All they do is the customer service. But with this collection of people all doing their thing that they're great at and they love doing, focused work, we can get all the things done for the business with the founders of the business only needing to work limited hours on the most important things.
Does that make growth difficult to not have someone that is doing something other than maintaining, or is that part of your 3 to 4 hours of deep focused work?
Right. My focused work is on the growth. So yeah, so Paperbell actually has had a excellent year over year growth rate. We've doubled every year. So all of our growth strategies are scalable. We grow largely by SEO. We also do paid ads.
So this is a great example. You're saying that you're doing part-time hours as focused as possible. You're speaking my language. I use a fairly similar structure with my day. What are you doing with the other hours? How are you spending those?
I kind of more or less work kind of school hours, which is like 9 to 3. I also don't work on Fridays, but then also 9 to 3 is my time to exercise, to see my friends. So I usually don't start work until 10 because it's kind of like kid time, drop them off about 9. And then I have that hour to do exercise or meditation or whatever. And then, my husband and I trade off sometime. And it's like, we're also very, very flexible with our schedules. Like right now it's 5:30 p.m. my time because I do podcast recording with people in the US and it's too early to do them in the morning in the UK. So it's like I have flexibility where I need to. Today I'll get home later than normal, but like at 6 instead of at 3. And this happens like once a month. So we have that flexibility. But I think, school hours are kind of a good, something that's worked for us. It's like get kind of our life outside of the kids done in those school hours. And then we're having family time basically outside of school hours.
So this brings up another question. With you and your husband, it's very important that you've been working together as business partners. A common obstacle of people who are married in business together is it's hard to turn it off, right? You're going on a date, but you're talking about something that the employee did or something that a customer said. Are you successful at being able to create a barrier? Is it a struggle? And if you are successful, what are you doing to maintain that boundary?
The way that we handle this, which works for us really well, is Chris will sometimes joke that he's uncredited co-founder. So one reason for that is he has no interest in having any kind of public persona. But the other thing that's worked really well for us is even though we're co-founders and we started the business together, we don't run the business together. He creates the product. So we actually aren't collaborators on like who to hire and how to spend the budget and kind of like strategic decisions with a business. That's all me. He is in charge of making the product great. So we do talk about work at different times, but we don't tend to have much conflict about work because we're not having to like discuss and compromise. Like we would we would have a lot of conflict if we had to figure out everything together. You know what I mean?
Okay.
It's kind of a divide and conquer strategy, I think, that works for us. Like we have our separate lanes that we're solely in charge of. So there doesn't really have to be debate about work.
But you're able to also not discuss the bigger picture issues of work? Or is that sometimes something where you have to remind each other, hey, let's turn this off for a second?
I think we're just not that interested in each other's work is the truth. So, for us, the core metric is like monthly reoccurring revenue. He didn't even know what our monthly reoccurring revenue was. He's not that interested in the business side of the business. And I'm not that interested in when the server goes down. We do talk about work at different times, but it doesn't tend to be this like, oh, we're always discussing the next crisis. I think because we have like our separate crises from each other.
Well, you have a really clear division of labor. And that's where I see the problems occur is where two people are kind of in that leadership managerial role. And that even if they get along, it just starts to become a consuming conversation. And if I'm coaching someone, I say, okay, you guys need to schedule something that you're going to do together that is not work related, something else to talk about, some other hobby that you're interested in.
Yeah, I find for married couples who want to work together, if you have totally different skill sets, it's going to be a lot easier. But I mean, I think this is true for any co-founder relationship. And this is something that I've just come to over the years in business. I've become so much more of a dictator. And I find like obviously getting feedback as needed. But I find that it's so much more clear if it's just like, you're the decision maker on this. You don't need to talk to anybody about it. You don't need to get anybody's input. It clears up a lot of potential conflict that co-founders have with each other, is just that clarity on like, oh, this is a finance one. And we decided that you're in charge of finance stuff. So like, that's just you.
Yeah, and this is true even without being married to someone. When someone starts a business and there are partners involved, you need to have those clear dividing lines, like you're sharing, Laura. That's a great example. All right. Unfortunately, I need to start wrapping this up. So the big question, 5 years from now, where do you see yourself? Where do you see your business?
Oh, so I'm not someone who sets big long-term goals, actually. I'm more of a believer in discovering what amazing experiences life presents me with, because like some people love to have a bucket list. I'm like, show me what you got, because there's so much there's so much cool stuff that I wouldn't even think to put on my bucket list that comes my way. So I think in 5 years, I probably will be doing a different business. I've been running Paperbell for 4 years now. I think I do love that like startup stage, starting something rather than being the one to grow something really huge. So I wouldn't be surprised if I have a different business. My family loves to travel. Last year, we took 6 months off to travel full time around Asia. And we definitely want to do more time, full time travel as a family. So maybe we'll be having our next go at that in 5 years.
Actually, I do want to talk about that just briefly. What does that travel look like? I mean, I hear about the nomad lifestyle, the digital nomad, right? And I think I've got children who are in school. I've got an 18-year-old. Now he's kind of out of the house, but I've got a 15-year-old. I got an 11-year-old. We like to travel, but doing that for 6 months, that just seems like a logistical nightmare. How do you make that work? Okay.
Yeah, you spend a huge amount of time on logistics for sure. My friends with older kids have all told me like do it before they're teenagers, because once they're teenagers, they don't want to. And we've always done a lot of travel with our kids. We've taken a month to go to Thailand, taken a month to go to Japan. So it was something we were already doing as a family, and our kids were kind of used to it. But when we did the 6 months, my daughter was 4 and my son was 8. So she didn't really need to do school yet. He's actually just a really big reader. So he just reads all the time anyway. And we're like, we're in Korea, read this book about Korea. And, we just sort of pretended that was, that was enough as far as the education went. But it's an intense experience. I mean, we were together literally 24/7 for 6 months.
Oh my goodness. So, yes.
Yeah.
I love my children, but that's a long time to be together.
It's a lot.
Continually.
It's a lot. We wouldn't want to do it. Some people do it full time, like all the time. We like did our 6 months and we're like, this was super fun. We're ready for some normal time at home now.
Yeah. I found that about 6 weeks is our max limit.
Yeah.
It's too much. Now it's probably more like 2 weeks now. But that's wonderful that you do that and create those opportunities. Okay, Laura, this is the part where I like to help someone who's listening find an action item that they can do. Not like a month from now or a year from now, but something they can do today, this week, to help them be successful. And the goal is to help them make your success story a part of their success story. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to summarize, oh boy, there's so many things in here, but I'm going to do my best to choose 3 possible action items that they can take. And then I'd like you to chime in at the end with one of yours. Sound good?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. The first thing that I'm going to call out is going back to your story when you were starting your business, you were going to the chambers of commerce and networking, and that concept of focus on people who you naturally connect with. You don't need to be everybody's best friend, and you probably shouldn't try. Instead, find someone that you connect with and build that relationship, and then find one other person. And I'll also add this, make sure that you're making it about them, not you. So look for ways that you can network with people, either in person or online, and start to build those relationships, because down the road, they always have an impact on your business success. I also I'm going to combine a couple of concepts here, but your example of looking for what is easy. for what is natural. That sounds lazy, but it's not. It's smart. It means that you're going to learn how to grow a business without being dependent on you. Or even if you're not growing a business, building a career where you're doing the thing that comes naturally. And that is such an important point. I have built my career by doing what is easy and natural for me. And usually what is easy and natural for you is not what it is for someone else. So don't discount it. Don't think, oh, I don't have that. So just take some time this week and consider what is easy, what is a natural fit. And then I'm going to call out that principle of 3 to 4 hours of deep, focused work a week. Now, someone listening, you may be in a position where you need to work a full-time job. We're not saying, I don't think, Laura, you're saying don't work a full-time job.
Right.
But what we are saying is recognize what are those hours when you're getting the most done. In my books and courses, I call them the most valuable activities, and focus those most valuable activities during those hours when you're most productive. Try to move meetings outside of that time. Try to move busy work outside of that time. And the more you focus on those most valuable activities during the time when you have the most energy, the more successful you'll be in growing your career. So those are 3 that stood out to me. Laura, what's one that you would add as an action someone can take today or this week?
So I would add looking for something that you can make easier and more enjoyable. And I think often when we are in a job, we forget how much control we have because we often don't ask, right? Like, so a really common example of something you could change this week is maybe there's a meeting that you're in every week. That's just a total waste of your time. You don't need to be there. It bores you to death, right? If you can bring up with your manager, I think I could have a more productive hour. I don't think I need to be in this meeting, and I see something else that I could do that would add more value to the company during that time. Do you think I could try skipping it for the next month? And we'll see if I'm still able to keep up without it, right? I think we often just don't think to ask. We just accept the status quo. So I think what you can do this week is look around for things that you want to change, that you're not enjoying, and make one of those little changes to make your work easier or more fun.
Beautiful principle. I love how you created it in a way that someone can listen to it and apply it to themselves no matter what their position is. I can tell you're a pro, that you're comfortable behind the mic and sharing these things with us. Thank you so much for your wisdom, for your example. And I think people are really going to gain a lot out of this. So thank you for being generous with your time, Laura.
Thank you.
And thank you, everyone, for listening. Remember, it's not so much about the knowledge you gained or the stories that you heard. It's about the action that you take. So do something today, and that way you'll make Laura's success story a part of your success story. Thanks for listening.
You've been listening to the Dave Crenshaw Success Show, hosted by my dad, Dave Crenshaw, and produced by Invaluable Incorporated. Research and assistant production by Victoria Bedez. Sound editing by Nick Wright. Voiceover by me, Darcy Crenshaw. And the music is by Ryan Brady via Pond 5 Licensing. Please subscribe to the Dave Crenshaw Success Show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you like to get your podcasts. If you have a suggestion for someone my dad might like to interview, please send it to guests@davecrenshaw.com. And please don't forget to leave us a 5-star review. See you next time!